Imagine walking into your family gathering and instead of dreading it or bracing for an argument or being insulted the second you walk in the door, you're actually feeling peaceful. You're looking forward to it. You're kind of amused by the entire circus of it all. Does that sound impossible? Well, it's not. That's where I've come from. So I'm going to show you the exact techniques and ways of thinking that turned me from being a super reactive mess around my family to the calmest person at the dinner table, and I'm not exaggerating about that. To start, let me explain why your family is able to rile you up so much, because that's important to understand. Have you ever noticed how family always seems to find the exact comment that pushes your buttons, right? Your family knows how to push your buttons because they built the buttons. They are the reason the button is there. The reactions that feel like you're losing control are probably old protective patterns that your body and your mind learned when you were younger. The real reason your family can still get under your skin is not because you're weak, it's not because you're unhealed, there's nothing wrong with you. It's because they activate the old role you had to play growing up. For a lot of people watching this, that role was some version of the caretaker. You were the peacekeeper in the family. You were the good one. You learned to be a mediator. You learned to monitor everyone else's moods so you could stay emotionally safe. You had to be attuned to everyone else in order to feel safe in your house. That's what codependency actually is. You have learned how to center other people in your life so you don't get hurt. And in the process, you've abandoned what you need and you've lost touch with how you actually feel and being able to understand and control your own emotions in the process of all of that. So when you walk into a family gathering, you're not just seeing your mom or your brother, your body thinks it's walking back into the same job that you had as a kid. That's why your reactions feel so automatic. That's why they're so quick. They take over you so quickly and they feel really intense. Now, I do not want you to think that is the same thing as you being defective. Just because you react that way does not mean anything is wrong with you. And I see this a lot in my comment section. I see it in the replies I get from my newsletter. People think I am blaming them for their reactions. And that is your codependency talking, because codependent people feel like everything is on their shoulders. They are responsible for fixing everything. Oh, I'm responsible for dealing with my messed up family now. I'm the one that has to be the adult in the room. You're blaming me for the dynamic that I'm experiencing my whole life. If I have to change, that means it's my fault. No, baby girl. No. There is a huge difference between taking responsibility for yourself and your actions and taking responsibility for your family and thinking that you are responsible to change them. And this is actually why I stopped teaching manifestation content, because it taught people that you are responsible for others. And my audience already thinks that, and I'm not going to perpetuate that idea. The thing you need to remember is that it is not your job to change anyone in your family or anyone in your life for that matter. It is not your task. You cannot control how people act. You cannot control the lack of emotional maturity that people around you have. You can't control how people think. You cannot control how people show up because they have wounds of their own and they have issues of their own, and you can't change that for them. The only thing you have control over is how you react to their behavior, how you view their behavior, how you think about the situation. And what I want to instill on you today is that you do not have to react in the same way you have in the past. You have a choice. I promise, no matter what condition you've been diagnosed with or what personality traits inherently you think you have, you can do this. Because I used to think exactly like you. I used to think that I was just an emotionally reactive person, that I was highly sensitive, that I had, like, fill in the blanks of the diagnoses, like all of them. And it's just how I was. I can't change. It's not true. There are generally 4 different ways you can respond to stress: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I did a really good deep dive on these 4 topics, but I'll give you the quick version here in case you don't want to go watch that, but it is a very good video. I highly recommend it. When we become over-reliant on 1 or 2 of these stress responses, it's a result of a tumultuous childhood experience usually. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to cycle through all 4: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Frequently, my audience has trouble fawning. They want to manage people's emotions in order to stay safe. They learn to fawn. You may not be a fawner, you may have just found this video, so if you had to argue to be heard in your family, you may have learned how to fight. If you had to hide in order to feel safe, you learned to freeze. You probably identify with more than one stress response, but we tend to all have at least a dominant one or 2 that we default to. I made a quiz that you can take. It's linked in the description below if you want to figure out what your primary stress response is. And if you confirm your subscription to my newsletter, you'll get a deep dive document that I spent a lot of time working on that gives you way more information about each type and some journal prompts that you can use to work on some of your tendencies if they're becoming problematic for you. But to go back to family stressors, when your mom makes a comment about your weight or something like that, it goes beyond that singular interaction. If you start to feel really overwhelmed by her comments, there's a good chance that you are emotionally flashing back to the entire history of that dynamic with your mother. And it activates that same protection that you defaulted to when you were a child. So if you tend to fawn, you may start being agreeable and explaining how you're working on losing weight and you're trying to find a personal trainer or whatever. You start to tell her that, no, I will be good. I'm going to be good. I'm going to get there. I promise I'll do it. I'll do it. If you default to flight, you may get really busy around the kitchen and refuse to sit still long enough to have a conversation with her, or you're just avoiding her. You're trying to get away from her. If you're more of a fighter, you might start an argument with her. Maybe it'll devolve into insulting her back. And if you're a freezer, you may say nothing. You just let her talk at you and hope she stops, or maybe you go hide in the bathroom. Everyone has a home-based stress response, but you might move through several in one night. So you may start by fawning for a bit and then fight when you've had enough, and then freeze or flee when it feels overwhelming or hopeless. And it's normal to cycle through that stuff, especially if you don't know how to regulate your body. These reactions that you learned as a kid were smart. They kept you emotionally safe in a family where you did not feel seen or understood. And I know it's frustrating to be working on yourself and you still have to deal with your family that's preoccupied by messed up stuff and saying harmful things, and they seem to refuse to change ever at all. And you start to feel resentful. You're like, why am I doing all of this if there's still these people? And the win you're looking for in the beginning of changing your reactivity is to notice which old patterns and old roles show up and make one small conscious choice to break that pattern instead of defaulting to what you've always done. So here's what I recommend you do before seeing your family. The first tip I have for you is to tell yourself a different story about what is going to happen before you go into the family gathering. So let's say you're going to Thanksgiving dinner and you always have someone who makes a comment about your weight or your body, or I don't know, they ask you why you're still single. They're passing judgment on how you're living and your life. And those comments bother you because this person is supposed to care about you and want the best for you and not pass judgment like that in a way that's harmful. So before you go to this gathering, typically you get really worked up because you're anticipating these really passive aggressive or even just outright aggressive comments. You're preparing for battle and you may be thinking of zingers or insults to hurl back at them. You're dreading the interactions. It's like you're entering a war zone. It doesn't feel comfortable. Your body's on edge and you're preparing to navigate around landmines. Let me give you an alternative way of thinking about things. I want you to see this family gathering as an opportunity to experiment with your newfound desire to be less reactive. Think of it as a training ground. You're going to get the opportunity to choose differently because your family, when they're being little butt heads like that, are choosing the same BS that makes things worse over and over again. You are going to be the change you want to see. And the way you have to do that is by reacting differently. And I have a few exercises that can help with that. You do these before you're face to face with the people you're concerned about. You're going to think about this person you're worried about. Imagine them sitting across from you at the dinner table, wherever you're going to be, you're not watching this from a third person perspective. It's not a movie. You are looking at them through your eyes as if you're actually in the room with them. The reason for this is because I want you to be able to feel what it's like to be in their presence. What's going to happen to your body when they are right in front of you? How are you feeling? And I know first person perspective may be a little difficult to do at first. It's not our default as human beings, but just do the best you can. Sometimes it can help to do this with your eyes open, but keeping them a little unfocused instead of closing them. So once you feel like you've gotten a general idea of what that scene looks like from your perspective, as if they're in front of you, I want you to imagine them saying the terrible thing you're nervous about. And I want you to feel it in your body. What happens as you're experiencing them saying this? Obviously, it's not actually happening. It's in your mind. But you are confronting the dread that you are anticipating at this family gathering. That's what this is about. Allow it to wash over you, feel whatever emotion immediately comes up. And because you're alone and nothing is really hurting you in this moment except your own thoughts, you're in a safe space. You can take a deep breath. You don't have to think about your reaction. You can just allow the feeling to exist in you. And then once you're ready, you're going to imagine yourself saying something funny back. Something that diffuses the tension and changes the subject. You don't even have to come up with anything. Just imagine the other people around you reacting. Maybe they chuckle. Maybe you chuckle. Feel the emotions that come up because you reacted differently in this moment. Feel the relief of the tension that's being cut through the room. Like, allow that to wash over your body. Maybe you even feel a little proud of yourself for coming up with something so clever on the spot. Again, you don't have to come up with anything. The point of this exercise is not about having a comeback ready. This is about imagining what it would feel like to be cool, calm, and collected in a moment of potential humiliation and emotional disconnection from yourself. This is practicing detachment. This is what it means. What would it feel like to be a person who trusts themselves enough to give themselves the emotional leadership to address this issue head on without freaking out, without taking it personally, without feeling like you have to win over the argument? That's what we're doing with this exercise. Really sinking into that feeling of agency within yourself. You are emotionally capable of handling any nonsense that these emotionally immature people throw at you. This is how relational dynamics change. When one person's perception and behavior reorganize around compassion instead of being defensive, the interaction transforms. This is how I changed my relationship with my mother. I used to have a very tumultuous and contentious relationship with her, and now we're actually best friends. Because when I changed how I reacted to her, I was defensive. I was a little mean sometimes because she was mean to me. So I was mean back. And I realized, like, oh no, we can't do this. Like, this is not the relationship I want to have with my mother. And I had to choose to react differently. And as I reacted differently, I naturally just became more vulnerable with her in a way that felt incrementally safe to me. And that allowed her to become more vulnerable and not hide behind being defensive. And my mom was able to change in that time. We made huge strides. It took probably like 10 years, but over time we saw an incredible change of our relationship to the point where we are now very close friends. We've apologized to one another for how we treated each other. And she had a lot of ignorance about what I was dealing with as a child. I had a lot of ignorance about what she was dealing with as an adult, as a woman who was dealing with a man, my father. I did not expect her to change. I wanted to change how I reacted to her for my well-being because I was exhausted. Because I changed how I reacted to her, it gave her a pathway to change how she was reacting to me. And it was worth it. My next piece of advice is to kind of find these people amusing, almost like a little kid doing something silly. And I save this point for the end for the hardcore people that got here because I know some people might hate this advice. So thank you for getting to this point. Please consider liking and subscribing. I'm like 7,000 subscribers away from 100,000. It's very exciting. Finding this other person amusing is not about feeling superior to them. It's about reminding yourself that you have different and new tools now. You don't have to keep the dynamic going. You can change things even if this other person is choosing not to, is choosing to stay their same miserable, cantankerous self. They're going through some BS and you're operating with more emotional awareness now. You are more aware of their behavior than they are. And that's kind of funny. Like, not gonna lie, that's kind of hilarious. You may react and say, they're not amusing, they're saying terrible things, and I don't want to dismiss that, and I don't want to laugh at it because that makes me feel bad. And I don't think of amusement as the same thing as approval. I'm not gonna let their behavior set the tone for the night. They're acting foolish, they're saying foolish things. I'm gonna think of them as little jokesters. And usually when someone is acting that way, they are experiencing some sort of painful stimuli and then creating a story around it that encourages suffering. Because if we don't create stories around our pain, the pain might go away and we actually kind of like pain. As human beings, people really need to feel suffering because that's all that they know. And they don't know who they are without suffering. You might find that true of yourself. I know it was true for me. And once you're like, actually, I'm making this worse than it is, you realize that you were part of the reason it felt so bad. And I moved out of that. I no longer wanted to experience suffering as my main narrative. And hopefully that's where you are as well. You no longer want that to be your story. And in order for you to let go of the pain and the suffering that you see your family experiencing and perpetuating over and over again, you kind of have to look at them like, aw, they're little babies. Like they're trying to waddle around and they keep falling on their tushies, but they can't figure out their feelings. So when you see a little kid trying to walk and fall, it's very cute. And you may chuckle, but you also may feel a little frustrated and helpless. Like, you can walk so easily. You know how to walk. And you want to transfer your skill set to this little child, but you can't. The kid has to struggle to learn to walk on their own. And I kind of feel that way when I'm watching emotionally immature people. Oh my God, I feel this way while dating all the time. Like I meet guys who just don't have any emotional capacity. And I'm like, I want to give you my skill set, but I can't. Here are some journaling prompts for you to reflect in the comments or in your own journal about what you've just heard in this video. So at what point in this video did you feel resistance to what I was suggesting? When did you want to argue or say that won't work for me? That's just letting them get away with it, things like that. Reflect on your resistance because that's what you need to dig deeper on to ask yourself how you're getting in your own way. If you want more journaling prompts, you can pick up my journaling prompt deck. It has 160 prompts, just $7. You can find it in the description below. Or if you're not in a position to buy anything right now, totally get it. You can get 10 journal prompts for free when you sign up for my newsletter, again, in the description below. Now you know how to handle your triggering family, but your 4F stress response doesn't just apply to your family. So watch this video next to learn more about which of the 4F stress responses you default to and how you can work on healing from them. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.